What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the ARC podcast. I am your host, Brandon Zachary, here with my co-host, Matt Owens. Matt, how we doing today?
Blessed to be here, man. Let's get it rolling.
Let's get it rolling. For those of you who are new listening, this is the Athletes Resilience Center podcast, where we talk about everything mental performance in sports. And today's topic is going to be the resiliency from teams that we've seen throughout the college baseball playoff, the regional competition. I feel like this year there's been an abnormal amount of lower level schools that have overcome obstacles and beat some of the upper level schools. I think it's the first time ever they said that the 1 and 2 seeds both didn't make the super regional, which is pretty crazy and very unique. So definitely something we want to tune into because we've seen some patterns just watching the games over some of the mental aspects of the game that teams have been implementing that have been cool. And some of the coaches have come out and spoken about different things about what has kind of fired them up, their plan of attack for the weekend, and kind of how they've had success. So I think that's going to be a really fun conversation going over some of the things that we're seeing right now. So when this releases, it'll be after a weekend of the super regional playoff. So when we're recording right now, we're going to kind of talk about what we saw throughout the regular regional playoff and kind of some of the similarities and differences we've seen between teams. So Matt, obviously you're going to have the perspective of a college coach as well, but let's talk about some of these abnormalities that we've seen of some of the lower seeds taking down some of the bigger seeds, right? Like the 1 and 2 seeds coming in and playing at their home field in the regional and ultimately not being able to come out on top. So
Right.
I'd like to ask you, and we can kind of go back and forth about this, some of the pressures that you might face as a team being the 1 or 2 seed going into a competition like this, playing some lower level seeds that, might get hot at the right time, or like a lot of these lower level seeds you'll see are it's like, oh, they've won their last 9 games, like they steamrolled through their conference tournament. Like, what kind of pressure do you think you face as a 1 or 2 seed going in there and hosting?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with hosting is like the expectation to win, right? And
Definitely.
I think from like a player perspective in any sport, especially at the college level, when you're facing teams that you might not be familiar with or that you're ranked ahead of, like you almost kind of assume that it's going to be a little bit easier. And then
Right.
on top of it, or like if you're a player and you're not having a good day, you're like, oh well, someone else is going to pick me up and everything.
Right.
So like that kind of expectation mixed with like the pressure that's like it's must win. It just doesn't mix well, especially if you kind of have your back up against the wall. And
Yeah.
every coach, I think, especially the programs that we're talking about. You're talking about Texas, Vanderbilt, like they're going to be super, super prepared. Like those guys
Right.
aren't resting on their laurels. I don't want to say that their players like took their foot off the gas, but
Yeah, of
on the
course.
flip side, you might have all that pressure. You're like trying to defend something where a lot of these teams are playing with house money. They're coming into your
Yeah.
place, your home. You got
Right.
all your fans there, and they're like, man, we're going to just take it. Like, you're just
Yeah.
like, you're
Right.
not supposed to be there, or you are
Right.
supposed to be there and you have something to prove, right? So it's easier to hunt than to be the person that's getting hunted, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
really where a lot of those pressures creep in. And that's where it's kind of hard to then go out and, perform the way that everyone needs you and kind of expects you to perform.
Yeah, I think that was a really good analogy saying obviously you want to be the one hunting, not the one being hunted. And I think the thing about being a lower seed going into a regional at a certain place where the expectation's so high for them, as that lower seed, you're expected to lose. You're expected to go 2 and out and get out of that regional. You're playing free and you're playing fearless because there is no expectation on you, right? Like you can go out and you saw Murray State, right? Like they came out, they're playing free. Like if you watching the bullpen when they're playing against Ole Miss and like they're coming out and their bullpen arms are throwing balls right down the middle. Like
Yeah.
their relievers coming in are throwing sliders in the zone and they're throwing fastballs in the zone. It's like I'm gonna give you my best and let's see what you got. There's no nitpicking. It's not like I got to be really careful here. It's like, listen, we're here. We might as well just go right after them and attack them, right? Like the best that they're playing is that free and fearless baseball, and it's kind of cool to see. And on the flip side, when you're facing a team that's free and fearless and you're the one that has the expectation, it's like, as a hitter, you're like, I gotta be ready for this, right? Like when the pitcher's coming at you and he's just filling the zone up and being like, hit my stuff, let's see how this goes, right? The hitter's the one in that moment where it's like, crap, I gotta make sure I'm on top of this, right? Like, we gotta win this game. Where Murray State, it's like, we win or lose this game. We're supposed to lose this game, right? Like, this is free. This is house money. Like, we're just going out here and we're having a good time. We're trying to make program history here. Like, there's no pressure doing that. And then I think the other thing that's unique that we talked about with the 1 and 2 seeds and Vandy and Texas is, when you are a 1 and 2 seed and you've won that many games throughout the year, if you come into a regional and you lose your first or second game, you probably haven't had that feeling of adversity or like your back's against the wall the whole season, right? And practice makes perfect. And it's nothing against the teams because obviously in every dream world, you want to go, 70-0 if you can and sweep everything, right? Like that's what you want to do. That's the goal. That should be your aspirations is win as many games as you possibly can. But when you don't have that experience throughout the season where you did face that adversity, where you're winning every series, like you're not losing 2 games in a row because you guys are that good. Like you're not losing 1 game in a series because you guys are that good. Like when you face that adversity at your own field, when you're expected to win, that's also something where if you haven't experienced that, that's a tough thing to experience for the first time when it comes down to the playoffs, Like it's a whole new ball game and it can be hard for some teams to face that, especially if you're a younger team, right? Like some of the other seniors, you're at a certain point, juniors and seniors, you're playing for something a little bit bigger than just, I want to play in a super regional. You're playing for your youth and your amateur baseball status. Like I want to keep playing with these guys because this is going to be my last go at this, right? Like you're fighting for something, but when you're a little bit younger, sometimes that can be tough to visualize or go through because it's like, all right, I'll be here next year. We'll have our chance again. And it's like, no, these older guys, this is it. They're hopefully going to go play professional baseball after this. But then, as we've heard from a bunch of different people, it's much different going to the pro side than playing in the college baseball. So I feel like there's a lot more pressures being that upper level seed, like the higher seed, like the 1 seed, than going in there and playing free and fearless.
Yeah, and especially like during the season, speaking to the point where it becomes must win, obviously in a regional, there's a lot of teams that, you can say, hey, like this series is must win when you're in the regular season. You don't really play in those do or die situations until the end of the year where the picture's gotten much clearer, right? Like
right.
You can tell your team, hey, this is a must win series. Hey, this is do or die. But until that picture really becomes clear, you don't know. Right. So like
Definitely.
A lot of these teams, they drop a series, in March and they're like, okay, well, we hop back on the horse and we get it next week. Right. We get in the next series. Whereas here, there is no next week unless you take care of business. Right. So a lot of those like the lower seeds, the mid majors, like, some of those teams have actually had to go through those do or dies. And even some of those power 4 schools that are, maybe a 2, a 3 in their region, they've played probably more do or die baseball than some of those, top seeds, throughout the course of the year.
Right.
So, it's always something that's kind of fun to look at where everyone's like, hey, it doesn't matter, what seed you come in at, are you hot? And, let's kind of transition to, the team that wasn't necessarily super hot coming in, but, Arkansas Little Rock. And they played out of their minds in the LSU regional.
Right.
And it was cool to see because, like, everyone was like, they shouldn't be here. And, like, even the announcers, like, I don't want to say the announcers were dogging them, but they're like, they shouldn't be here. And then they win one game. And you're like, oh, wait. And then they win the second game. You're like, oh, man.
Like, here we go.
They asked their coach, like, hey, how has this been? He's like, it's life-changing. And it's like, if he's saying that, the rest of those guys, they're feeling like it's life-changing too. They're like, no one looked at us prior to this week. And, they come in, you're like, it's Arkansas Little Rock. Like, they're the 4. Like, we're just going to roll them real quick. And they're like, no. Like, we're here to play. And it was awesome to see. Take it to the championship final game of the regional.
And when you are in that moment as that team, right? And it's like you win one game and then you win the next. It's
Yeah.
like, oh my God, we have the potential to win this thing. Like, we can do that. You get that little bit of inspiration, that little bit of fire, because it's like, we've proven, right? Bang, we won 2 games in a row. This is our regional, right? Like, that's almost the mindset you get. It's like, once you get a little bit of that taste of success there, and it's like, uh, you're proving to yourself we can compete with these big time schools, man. Like, let's keep the ball rolling. But then on the flip side, right, like you talked about in the LSU regional, I think a big thing that I saw in one of the interviews that we posted on the Instagram account was Jay Johnson, the head coach at LSU. He was asked in an interview after the game, like, you see a lot of these teams around the league, right, around the regionals, losing as the 1 or 2 seed, right? Like, we're seeing things that are probably unprecedented than like normal, right? Like, a lot of those teams are winning. And they asked him, like, how do you navigate that level of pressure or that level of fear that, like, oh no, like, are we going to be another one of those teams? And his response, I thought, was unbelievable. He was talking about, like, I woke up that day and he said, I wrote the lineup and I tried to get that out as early as possible, right? Basically identifying, okay, this is game day. This is our objective. This is our lineup. These are the guys we're going to war with, right? Being very particular about this is it. Then the next thing that I loved that he talked about was he put next to each guy's name in the lineup what their role and responsibility was today, which I think is super, super cool because it's like, all right, everyone now has a clear understanding of what their particular objective is for the day. Great, we can implement that. And then it went as far as someone on the bench, he put in, you are going to get a pinch hit today with men on base. And that guy got a pinch hit with men on base and drove runs in. It's like things like that are unbelievable that he was that specific and particular, but I think that goes to show, and this could be implemented at any level by anyone, right? If you have a start day, if you're in the lineup that day, clearly write what your objectives are for that game. What is your plan of attack? What are you good at that you can excel at, that you can bring to the game that day? And then particularly write specific moments in that game where either you're going to succeed or you're going to face adversity and how you're going to overcome that adversity, right? Like, I'm sure that guy on the bench doesn't necessarily love that he's playing on the bench, but giving him that opportunity to be like, you are going to come up with men on base and you are going to succeed. Like, that's huge. That's huge. And all that guy has to do now at that point is follow the script. There is no leaving anything to the imagination. It's all written out there. This is my plan of attack for today. All I have to do now is just go out and execute. And I think that's like the most powerful thing, right? Like, anyone can implement that. If you're a starter, go in, write out your plan of attack for the day. What's my objective? Whether it's I'm going to throw a ton of strikes. Okay, great. What makes you most successful when you're on your game? I'm going to do this, this, and this. I'm going to attack the zone. I'm going to be fearless. Great. Now, write down what are you going to do when adversity is in your way, right? Like, I'm going to come in the game where there is bases loaded and 2 outs. I am going to feel pressure, and I am going to overcome and strike the guy out to get out of the inning, right? Like, clearly identifying your mission and your objective, I think, is extremely important in kind of finding success and mentally preparing for that game.
I agree. And, on the coaching side of things, like, Jay Johnson's as cool as can be, man. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's awesome that, he did that for his guys. And, obviously he's a national championship coach. And,
Right.
So he's been there. So he's been in that war. He's felt those pressures before. And so he's just like, this is what it takes to go where we need to go. Even if he didn't have one player left from that national championship team a couple years ago, like, he could still provide that pathway for his guys to walk and everything. And I thought it was awesome also, like, in game, they interviewed him, I think it was in the 5th inning, and they had just squandered a bases loaded opportunity and they're down, right? And so, like, he hopped on the mic and, like, the announcers, it almost felt like they didn't want to be like too direct because they're like, he is taking this opportunity where his team's kind of sputtering, and he just rode the most even line possible. He was like, it's okay. Like, we still have life. We still have some innings to play with. we're getting the opportunity, so we know it's there. Now all we
Right.
have to do is just, do something extra, and then that opportunity becomes a result for us that's going to be good, right? And and it's what happened. Like, he gets the pinch hitter up, that guy drives and runs, and it's just like, but he talked the talk and then he walked the walk, and it's just like the most calm thing. It's easy for a coach in that moment to freak out or be like, oh man, like, I'm not going to take the interview. I really need to, like, be focused. But like, it almost like he believed it. He spoke into existence, and then it happened. And it was so cool to kind of see how that unfolded, and then hear about his process afterward in the press conference and everything.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think like all of those mental practices that you put in as a team that shows why LSU has been so successful for the last 10 years now.
Right.
Like, they're always successful, and implementing those like practices are ultimately so important because all those guys physically are ultra talented athletes, right? Like, there's no doubt about that. But what can kind of separate you in that capacity is your mental fortitude and your preparation, right? Like, if you're adding that extra level of, I'm speaking this into existence, I'm writing this down, and this is actually just the plan of attack that we're going to implement, like, that's super duper important and beneficial. And I think across the league, right, like, you saw some regionals that were a little bit fiery, right? Like, there was the Clemson regional where it's like Clemson and West Virginia, it's getting a little chippy. Like, the fans are really getting into it. They're crazy. They're chirping the bullpen guys as they're coming in, right? Like, I think that's also another level of like added craziness within some of these regionals is like, most of the time you like we said, Arkansas Little Rock wasn't hosting because I'm sure that wouldn't be as bumping as LSU, as Clemson, as Vandy, right? Like, some of these schools were getting pretty crazy and rowdy, right? Like, now as a lower seeded team going into there, right? Like, navigating that mental battle of how you face like everyone in the stands basically, right? You have your little section, like West Virginia had their families obviously, and like a few West Virginia fans, but primarily like that's Clemson's stadium, man. That's Clemson's home. Like, it's a bunch of orange, man, like just going crazy, crazy, crazy. But West Virginia showed to have that fight where they're like, I'm not backing down, and I'm going to show you that I'm also fearless, and we're going to get after it. And I think getting in the flow of that, and there were times like towards the end of the game, right? I think the fire might have gotten a little too hot and started walking some guys, letting guys get on. There were a couple hits, like Clemson started chipping back, but getting to that neutral mindset of, this is my mission, I'm going to play fearless, I'm going to play free, kind of helped them in the end win that regional. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
even going into somewhere that is a high pressure situation. And I think we talked about it in a previous podcast, but like a lot of that too can pair with like some of the breath work and visualization aspect of it going into a hostile environment, right? Like, I think a very important thing that I saw some pitchers implement, whether this was designed or not, was breathing and using their breath work and their neutral level of thinking through stressful and, crazy times on the mound, right? Like, a lot of the pitchers I saw when the crowd was getting crazy, they're taking steps off, taking deep breaths, right? And I think something you can add to your tool belt as any athlete is visualizing yourself in those pressured situations, feeling all of the emotions that come with that, right? Your adrenaline's at 110. You're feeling nervous, you're feeling energetic, you're feeling a little fearful, like, I can't walk this guy, I can't let this guy get a hit. You're hearing the crowd, you're smelling everything. You hear the opposing dugout go crazy and yell at you. You hear the fans yelling at you. Like, all of that, you're embracing all of those extra variables, and you're practicing on breathing through that and understanding, okay, I can breathe through that, I can get through this. So when the game comes, right? Like, when any of us get in a high adrenaline, high emotion situation, right? The last thing you're thinking about is taking a deep breath, right? Especially if you haven't practiced it, that's not going to be something that you're like, oh, I'm going to take a deep breath and now I'm going to get back to where I need to be. It's something that you can visualize, right? It's easy to visualize success. It's easy to visualize you succeeding, but visualizing you facing a little bit of adversity and learning how to breathe through that and get back to that neutral state is going to be really important, really beneficial. And I feel like the teams that had success were able to, whether it was intentional or not, have that level of, mental preparation for those moments.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the biggest thing too, like, you see a couple teams that, are up on these higher seeds, and then all of a sudden, higher seed starts to come back and everything. And then It's just like, okay, how do we stop this? But then how do we continue to like push on forward? And I thought, Ole Miss, Murray State, like that whole regional was a war all weekend. That was so much fun to like really enjoy. And, Ole Miss in that, I think it was the final game, Murray State hopped out to a huge lead on them. And, Ole Miss, they chipped a little bit. And then Murray State had like maybe 4 or 5 innings where they were just rolling away. And, they weren't really building upon their lead, but they were just kind of holding it. And then all of a sudden, Ole Miss was just start going through arms. They're like, all right, like, hey, you let a guy on base, a walk, a hit, off the mound. Like, next guy comes in. And, like, I thought, head coach Bianca, I thought he had a great demeanor kind of going out, taking the ball from the next guy. And, like, the camera, obviously, like, they're going to want to show, how he's feeling through this. And, like, they zoomed in on him a couple times, and it was just straight-faced. He got the ball ready, handed it off to the next guy. And so it was like almost like the mission, even though it's silent, it's understood. Like, hey, like, do your job, get us out of this, and then we're just going to keep moving forward. It was a couple times where he took a guy off the mound. You didn't even see him say anything. He just took the ball, gave it to the next guy. It was almost like business as usual. And all of a sudden, Ole Miss starts to come back. So it's like you can only imagine, like, in the dugout, it's still calm. Like, it's still positive. It's not getting down on yourself. They're like, okay, even though we're down, I don't know how many runs it was. Let's just say 5, 6 runs. We could still make this work. And like, it's the coolest thing because like, even though we talked about you can lose a series in March and come back the next weekend and win. While you play a regular season, it tells your journey to get to that point, right? I'm sure there's a time where Ole Miss was down 8, 9 runs, and they came back and won throughout the course of the year, right? So it's, you talk about being able to practice through it, like you get that active practice in game, right? And like, so it's not your first time actually like going through that situation, going through that scenario. And, to your point, like seeing yourself go through a hard time and be able to bring yourself back in your visualization. Well, during the regular season, if you maybe aren't prepared to that point and you get to go through it, right? After the game, maybe journal it, write it down like, hey, when I went to the plate, I felt anxious, right? Maybe the next time I'm feeling anxious, I can do this, even though it's not the same situation. Maybe later on down the road, you run into that same situation, but now you're more prepared to go and do that walk and kind of go through it. Because when you play in these postseason games, man, like you've probably been feeling this before, you've been in this situation before. Well, if you're not really taking that into account when you're in that moment in the past, well, when you get there in the future, you're probably going to be going through the same thing again and again.
Right. No, I completely agree. And I think, like you said, going through that in game and potentially journaling it after the game, right? Like understanding this is how I felt, and it's totally okay to feel that way. But again, it's like, you got to find a process that'll work for you that helps you get out of that, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of nervousness, right? Like there are different methods that you can try to implement and you can practice on throughout the rest of the season that can get you prepared for that regional time frame. And I think you brought up something cool with Ole Miss, where, like throughout the year, you have your scheduled pitchers, right? It's like you got your 1, 2, 3 typically in a college baseball, your Friday, Saturday, Sunday guy, and then you got your midweek guy, you got your 4. Like, I think it's cool when we get to regionals, and especially the teams that are coming out of the loser's bracket, at a certain point, your guys are cooked because you've thrown them all, right? Like, then you got guys that wouldn't normally pitch in these situations coming in, and some of them are seeing success, right? And I think there's nothing better for a team than when a guy that has worked hard all season but hasn't necessarily gotten all the opportunities just because talent-wise he might not be one of the better guys. When he goes in there and he succeeds, that'll fire a team up and bond a team together better than anything, right? Like when your back's against the wall and you got guys coming out of the bullpen who typically aren't your main bullpen guys, and they're going out and they're throwing up zeros. They're keeping you in the game, right? Nothing fires you up more than that. And it also brings you more confidence if you do win that regional, going into a super regional, going into the College World Series, going, hey, if we run out of our dudes, we have other guys that have proven to step up and come up in big spots. And I think that's something that, when you think about it, you're like, oh no, we're in a corner. Like, all of our guys are done. Like, our best arms are cooked, and now we're throwing guys out of the pen that don't necessarily have a lot of innings on the year. But I think ultimately that makes you stronger going into the Super Regionals or the College World Series, because when your back is against that corner, it's like, hey, we've been here, we've done that, and the guys that we throw out are ready for this moment, and they're ready to come in and shove.
Right. Yeah. I think it's beautiful in a region where, you might be up, you might be down, and they show the graphic, and my guys got, close to 1-to-1, K to walk ratio, and a little bit of an inflated ERA, and they're like, he's only pitched in 8 games. Well, game number 9, my man, here you are. It's a regional, right? And so I thought in some of the games I watched over the weekend, like those guys that maybe didn't have as good regular seasons or didn't pitch as much in the regular season, they got a chance in the regional, and majority of them went out and did well, or well enough for whatever the situation presented themselves with, whether that might be, minimizing damage or, whatever. But it just goes to show, like, hey, like, when you're on a team, even if you're not playing as much as you want to, or maybe you think you should, at the end of the day, like, you're there for a reason. The coach has brought you there for a reason, and you don't know what situation you're going to go into, right? Because you pitched 7 games in, a regular season, or you only got like 30 at-bats in a regular season, the next at-bat might be the most important bat of your season, not only for yourself, but for your team as well. Same thing, like, you might have only 7 appearances in a regular season in a 56-game Division I schedule. Well, now you're pitching in a regional. Maybe you didn't even pitch in a conference tournament. Like, there were some guys that hadn't pitched in 20 days that were pitching.
Yeah.
Be ready, right? Be ready, continue to grind, continue to put yourself in position to get better, so that when your number is called, you go out and you perform. And, I think a lot of, players, high school, college players even, like, you kind of look at it, you're like, well, I'm not being used, so, like, what's the point, but at the same time, you're like, well, I'm just not going to play. Well, if you approach every single day like, hey, I'm a step away, or hey, I'm a couple outs away, or hey, I'm a couple runs away from playing, like, you're going to be more ready once that situation does arise, and you're probably going to succeed in it as well.
No, I agree. And, we've all played with guys, I'm sure, that they're not throwing a lot, they're not getting at-bats or opportunities a lot, and halfway through the year, they kind of seem a little checked out. Maybe they're not taking their weightlifting as seriously, maybe they're not taking their swings and opportunities in practice as seriously. But the teams that have the most success come regionals are a group of guys filled with those where even the guys on the bench that aren't ready for their opportunity, like haven't had many opportunities throughout the season, are prepared and ready because they've taken every day in practice as their game, right? Like, they're training and ready for that moment. And that's what I think separates the great teams from the good teams, is not just necessarily, like, all of your starters obviously are going to have talent, right? But it's the depth of the guys off the bench. And it's not even necessarily depth as in, like, oh, they have more talented guys off the bench. It's, no, those guys are more prepared physically and mentally than the guys on the other teams, right? Like, the pinch hitter for, like we talked about, the pinch hitter for LSU, right? Like, that could be a guy that throughout the year he's like, screw this, I'm just getting pinch hits all year, right? Like, okay, well, if you have that mindset, you're not taking everything seriously every day. When you do come up in a regional and you do have that confidence from your coach of, hey, you're going to come in and get a pinch hit with the guys on base and you're going to score them. Like, you're not going to be ready for that moment if you're not taking the rest of the year seriously. Like, it's those moments where everyone in the bullpen, everyone off the bench have to be on the same page of every day I'm going to come in, because once I get my name called, once I get my shot, I'm going to be ready for this and I'm going to succeed.
Yeah, it's togetherness and it's accountability. I think that really, goes into that, right? Where, you could be on the bench and, I don't know when my time's going to come. And, if you have that big brother or you have another person on your team that's like, be ready, like, stay ready. And, like, really that can bring you as a group together. And then once you're together, like, anything is possible, right? And so
Yeah,
you go out and
definitely.
play, and then your brother, your teammates, they all have full confidence in you, and the coaching staff has
Right.
confidence in you, and now you can go out and you can play, and it's that freedom and everything like that. It's almost like
Yeah.
taking the shackles off, and you're like, all right,
Yeah.
I can be me, right? Instead of
I could be me.
you could be the guy also that's in the dugout on the bench, and like you're not getting these chances, and now you're in the regional and you're looking at three other teams, and you're like, I could be on the field for that team. Well, I could be on the
Right.
field. Like
Right.
that's what separates it, right? And then when you get a chance, you're almost just like they threw me a bone, rather than being like, oh, they believe in me, right? Like
Right.
you could take it two different ways, but the reason why those teams are there is because more often than not, all 64 teams have that cohesion. They have that togetherness and everything.
Exactly.
Like, and they want to be there. And like, obviously you have your travel roster, so I'm sure some of the problems are left at home. But at the same time, like it takes the whole group to move together and work together.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point where like a lot of those guys may take it personally, like you said, where it's like, I could play at that school, I could play at this school, but at the end of the day, right? Like it's your career and it's your season, and you have full power over how that works, right? Like your takeaways of the season, whether it's a good year or bad year, are all based off of your perceptions, right? Like maybe you think it's a bad year because you didn't get your at bats. Well, maybe you didn't get your at bats, but what did you do when you did get those at bats, right? Like if you made the most of it, how can that be considered a bad year, right? You made the most of the opportunities that were given to you. If at the end of the season you're going to transfer, because now it's a big thing, a lot of people are in the transfer portal, like that's one thing. But when you're in the actual season itself, that can't be your main thought, right? Like you're in the moment, you're in your season, you got to capitalize and make the most of it, right? Like, and if you're going to transfer at the end of the year and go to different schools where you're going to be able to get another opportunity, maybe it just wasn't the right fit for you, right? Like you're going to have to be the one that sits on paper and looks at your year the year prior and explain to those coaches what happened, why you're switching schools, right? And if you're one where everyone can vouch for you and you were the teammate that busted your ass all year and worked real hard and were there for everyone and came up in the opportunities you were given, like no school is going to say no to that. You know what I mean? Like that's something that everyone would be fired up to be a part of.
Yeah, and honestly, you're there for a reason. Like back to my earlier point,
Right.
like they brought you there, right? So like they have confidence in you. So like if you're thinking
Exactly.
that I'm gonna skip town and it's gonna be easier somewhere else, like it, it might be for some guys, but other guys, especially the guys that aren't necessarily getting that consistent PT that they want or they think they deserve, like you could go to another place and the same thing could happen. Are you going to go to a third
Yeah,
school? Or are you going to stick with
definitely.
it? You're going to work through it, right? Like, the guys that are the upper echelon, like transfers, and truly, that's really what I think the transfer portal was really made for, was
Right.
for those upper echelon guys to move on and get a better opportunity, whether that be NIL, or a draft stock, or be able to play in a more winning program. Like I think that's what it's for. The guys at the bottom, every year there's thousands of kids that go into the portal, and there's thousands of kids that never play college baseball another day in their life, right? So it's
Right.
it's a big thing. It's a big deal. And so like it just makes it even more important that while you're in the spot that you're in, to make the most of it every single day.
Right. And we talked a lot about the player's perspective on a lot of this. Now, I'd love to hear the coach's perspective, because a lot of things that we talked about, like with Jay Johnson, and you said Bianco at Ole Miss, right? Like they stayed very neutral, it seemed. Like Jay Johnson clearly identified that, hey, even with our quote unquote backs against the wall with these expectations, it's just another day at the office, and this is our objective, and this is how we're going to accomplish that. What do you think is the most important aspects of being, a coach who will have success in a regional, right? Like it seems like these coaches that had these neutral mindsets and visibly were neutral and not letting the emotions get too high and too low, like had success. But then there's also Tennessee where, their head coach is a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more excitable. Like he's definitely a little bit more fiery, which works for them, obviously. And I wouldn't say like I've never seen him like, pout or get sad, you know what I mean? But like he's definitely very much more outwardly excited, outwardly vibrant. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think coaching wise would be really important mentally to kind of implement and show to your team when you're going through these regionals?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that like you also have to show that like you're in it with them, right? Like the saying
Yeah.
is that like most of your players take after your head coach, right? So like your personality kind of shines through them, right? So and kids are very good at identifying like a switch in like nature, right? Something good happens, they never look at the head coach, right? Like if something bad happens, they're always like moving their eyes
Yeah,
around,
yeah,
like
peeking to see what
what's he
happens.
think?
Right.
Like, how's he going to react to this, right? So, like, those guys that have shown and spoke to that neutral mind frame and, like, you're going through a struggle and you might still be there, arms crossed, and, you're watching a game or whatever posture you take when you're watching a game, if you're joking around and, not joking around, but, like, if you're still, like, positive, upbeat, they'll tend to kind of, like, ride with that. So I think on, like, the coach's side of things, the best thing to do is just be consistent and to be neutral at the end of the day. I remember a couple of years ago in our situation, like we had a playoff game and, I think it's the top of the top of the ninth. And, we're in control. It would have been the other team's, first ever playoff win. And they hit a grand slam against us. And I believe they went up 2. And I just remember, I'm a young coach at the time. So I just remember like, I'm like, man, that is bad. And I remember, like,
Yeah.
even me,
Yeah.
I'm like checking out our head coach, and like he just kept it. He was just locked in. He was straight. It's just like we got another chance. Like we get 3 more outs, and we end up coming back, win that game, and everything. And like that always stuck with me. And that's a lot of the better programs. Like they'll be able to bounce back from those situations because it's not panic time. It's never panic time. It's always realizing that like even if it's ninth inning, it's 2 outs and you got 2 strikes, you still have 1 strike left, you still have 1 out left, right? So playing with the life that you have, and I think a lot of those coaches this weekend did a great job of it, and it shined through in like the LSU and the Ole Miss situations and everything, where they were in a sticky situation and they were able to lead their guys through those trenches and everything.
Right. And I think the big takeaways that you said were like being consistent. And I think another thing is like being true to you as who you are as a coach. Because then if you're authentic, your players are going to be authentic. And I think that's what Tennessee's head coach shows all the time. Where like even he wouldn't necessarily be the poster boy for like neutral mindset, I guess, during the game, right? Because he really gets like excited and motivated. But the flip side of that is like he's letting all of his players express who they are. Like you see Liam Doyle, their pitcher, like he's crazy sometimes, and it's like that's what they're embracing. And they had the guy Andrew Fisher come up, and like the whole crowd's going crazy, and he's like pumping up the crowd, and they're like almost encouraging that, right? Yeah. Like they're letting their true side show. And I think he does a brilliant job at that. And that's because he's true to himself, right? Like he's not trying to sugarcoat anything. He's trying to be himself at all times. And I think that's really important too, right? Like if you show that you can stay neutral throughout the year, or like for him, right? He's getting fired up whether it's a Tuesday game or whether it's the regional game, right? Like that's the way he is. If you are staying true to yourself and consistent with that throughout the season, all your guys are going to want to play for you and do the same thing, right? Like that almost invites everyone to do the same exact thing, where just be you and be real, man. Like that's most important. You can't come out at the end of the game when you lose. You can't come out and like throw jabs at guys and like say, hey, like you didn't come up in a big spot today. Like you can reframe that in other ways and have conversation with guys like, hey, like tomorrow when you're in that spot, you're going to come up big. And I know that. And today you might not have, but tomorrow you will. Or like you can't come out after a loss and give a generic speech, because no one's going to be like, that's not real. That's not coming from your heart. Where I'm sure Tony V's never given a generic speech in his life to his team, right? Like it's always coming from the heart. And I feel like a lot of guys want that and want to play for that. Like that's how you're going to get the best out of yourself, is if your coach is on the same page as you, letting everything out that stays true to you. Like your vision, your beliefs, like if those come out every time you coach, your players are going to do the same thing.
Absolutely. Just be your true authentic self through everything. Highs, the lows, the neutral times. Like, just be your authentic self, and like, it just brings out the best in everyone, right? As long as it's directed in the right way, it ends up bringing out the best. And like, I remember seeing after they won the championship last year, they interviewed Tony V about, program, and like, not everybody would agree with like how, you guys act and everything. And like, he kind of did speak to like, this is who I am. And he's like, when I took over Tennessee, like, they didn't let us in. And he's like, we were going to find a way to get in. Like, yeah. And so it's like, it goes to show, like, every single time his guys go out, like, people are like, oh, that's not what college baseball is all about. Oh, that's not how you play baseball. Well, no, that's how they play baseball, right? And it's successful
and it
for
works.
them. Exactly. Like, it's not going to be for everyone. Not everyone can be able to emulate, what Tennessee is, right? Like, but at the end of the day, you have the right person that's leading the group. You have a bunch of guys that believe in their leader, and they're all being their authentic self. No matter how you like it, they are being their authentic self. And like, you know what they say, the truth hurts. So like, when you're being truthful to yourself, like, some other people can be offended by how real you're being, right? Whereas like, on the flip side, if you're a silent type, lead by example, quiet leader, that's fine too. We've seen those teams in the past win it as well. There's not one way to skin a cat. And like, we've seen those teams that are like, they only focus on their guys. There's other teams that talk trash and they win too. But be your authentic self throughout, whatever you need to do. Because we get to see 64 teams that made it to an exclusive tournament every single year, and they get to go out and perform. So you know that there's 64 successful programs out there, and not all of them look the same, right? Not all of them look the same. No matter how you feel about it, this is who they are. So like, you can learn from it, honestly, and see what it looks like in that specific program.
Right. And I think that's the beauty of baseball and sports, right? Is like, not every player is going to be the same, and not every coach is going to be the same. And I think the similarities that you've seen with these successful coaches, like, even though, like we said, Tony V and Jay Johnson may be completely different in the way they speak, in the way that they go about the game, and the way they coach, and the emotions that they show, I guarantee you, after the game, neither of those guys, after they face adversity, show fear, right? Like, and I think fear comes out when you lose a game and your head coach is calling dudes out. It's like, you didn't perform. It's like, that shows like a level of, you don't have confidence in your guys. It's like, why are you calling them out when, tomorrow we're going to get another opportunity, right? It's those guys where Jay Johnson may do it in a different way than Tony V, where Jay Johnson might be like, tomorrow's another day and we're going to get our opportunities and we're going to succeed. Where Tony V might be like, backs against the wall, but tomorrow we're going to come out and we're going to be firing, right? Like, he's might do it in a different way, but neither of those guys show a level of fear like we talked about. They're both coaching free and fearless, right? It's like, I have confidence in my guys. I'm not going to be negative and try to call guys out and, correct things. Obviously, sometimes things need to be corrected when there's, variables going on or, negative energy and stuff like that. But, when you're in a regional right there, like, that's not the time you start calling guys out and be reconstructive, right? That's the time where you get behind your guys and say, I have full confidence and trust in you that after this game, we're going to come back and we're going to be successful tomorrow. Like, there is no doubt that we're going to succeed. And I feel like all those coaches have shown that level of confidence in their guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think this is a good place to wrap up. I feel like we went over a lot, and we went over some cool things that we did see, and a lot of resilient trades from a bunch of different teams this week, whether it was being a top seed or being a bottom seed. And, looking forward to seeing how this whole thing plays out throughout this playoff. And yeah, fired up to continue watching. And it was a good conversation. And thank you guys all for tuning in. And I hope you guys can come up with some takeaways from this episode.
See you next time.
Awesome. See you next time.